The moment a single act of courage can change his action ignites a story of power, regret, and a love no one expected.
The glass shattered before anyone heard the shout. It burst across the marble floor like a gunshot, and the boy flinched so hard his chair scraped backward. For a split second, the entire restaurant froze, music stalled, forks hovered midair. Conversations collapsed into silence. Every eye drifted toward the drunk man, swaying near the center table, his red face slick with sweat and rage, his finger pointing straight at the child. "Watch where you're going, you little brat," he slurred. The boy couldn't have been more than 7. Dark hair, too neatly combed for his age. His hands trembled as he tried to apologize, words tangling in his throat. He had bumped the man's elbow by accident, while carrying a plate that was clearly too heavy for him. Before anyone else moved, the waitress was already there. She stepped between them without hesitation, placing her body squarely in front of the boy like a shield. One hand rested lightly behind his back, steady and protective. Her voice didn't rise. It didn't need to. "That's enough," she said. "He said he's sorry. You're done." The drunk laughed, loud and ugly. "And who the hell are you?" Her jaw tightened, but she didn't step back. "Someone telling you to sit down before you embarrass yourself further." Around them, fear crept into the room, not because of the drunk, but because of who sat in the corner booth, watching everything with calm, predatory focus. Salvatore Moretti did not raise his voice. He did not need to. Power clung to him like a second skin, invisible but suffocating. Men feared him not because he was loud or cruel in public, but because he was quiet and everyone knew what his silence meant. He had been observing his son all evening, letting the boy experience a rare night outside guarded walls. This restaurant was one of the few places Salvatore trusted, or thought he did. His dark eyes narrowed as he watched the waitress stand her ground. The drunk reached forward, attempting to shove past her. That was when everything shifted. She didn't scream. She didn't flinch. She grabbed his wrist and twisted just enough to stop him. No show, no theatrics. Just enough pressure to send a clear message. "Touch him," she said quietly, "and you'll leave here in worse shape than you came in." The boy clutched her apron from behind, burying his face into the fabric like he trusted her with his life. Salvatore felt something strange stir in his chest. Something unfamiliar. Anger, yes, but beneath it, a sharp, unexpected pull of respect. 2 of Salvatore's men were already on their feet. He raised a finger without looking at them. They stopped instantly. He wanted to see how this played out. The drunk yanked his arm free and staggered back, suddenly aware that the room had turned against him. Murmurs rose. Someone whispered Salvatore's name. The color drained from the man's face. I didn't mean," he stammered. The manager rushed over, pale and shaking. Apologies spilled from his mouth as security escorted the drunk toward the door. The tension didn't fade until the doors closed behind him. Only then did the waitress release the breath she'd been holding. She crouched slightly and turned to the boy, brushing imaginary dust from his sleeve. "You okay?" He nodded, eyes glossy but brave. "I'm sorry." "You did nothing wrong," she said softly. "Nothing at all." Salvatore stood. The room noticed. Conversations died again. Chairs creaked as people pretended not to stare. He approached slowly, every step deliberate. The waitress straightened, her shoulders stiffening as she sensed him before she saw him. When she turned, their eyes met. For one suspended second, the world narrowed to that look. She had tired eyes. Not weak, just worn. The kind that belonged to someone who had learned to endure rather than hope. There was strength there, too. Quiet, unpolished, real. "You're his father," she said, not asking. Salvatore glanced at the boy, then back at her. "Yes." "He shouldn't be here alone," she added, careful but firm. "He wasn't alone," Salvatore replied. Her gaze flicked briefly toward the men stationed discreetly near the exits. Didn't look like it. Something almost like a smile tugged at the corner of his mouth. "Almost." "You handled yourself well," he said. Praise from Salvatore Moretti was rarer than mercy. She nodded once. "I was just doing my job." "No," he said. "You were doing more than that." The boy reached for Salvatore's hand, still shaken. Salvatore placed his palm over the child's head, grounding him, then looked back at her. What's your name? She hesitated, just a beat. Alina. The name landed heavier than it should have. Alina, he repeated. From the corner of her eye, she noticed his gaze linger on her face, studying, calculating, as if filing her away in a place he rarely opened. Thank you, he said finally. She didn't respond right away. Instead, she looked down at the boy once more, smoothing his hair. When she looked back up, her voice was quiet but unyielding. Just keep him safe. Salvatore held her gaze longer than necessary. He had the unsettling feeling that this moment this woman was not something he could simply walk away from. And Alina, watching him turn and lead his son back to the booth, felt a tight, not form in her chest she couldn't explain, as if fate had just brushed past her shoulder and kept walking. Alina didn't notice her hands were shaking until she tried to stack the empty plates and nearly dropped them. She turned away from the corner booth, forcing her breath to slow. The restaurant had returned to its low-hum glasses clinking, cutlery scraping, muted laughter, but something fundamental had shifted. The air felt heavier, charged, like a storm that had passed too close. She knew who he was. Everyone did. Salvatore Moretti didn't need introductions or headlines. His name lived in lowered voices and unfinished sentences. Men like him didn't come into places like this by accident, and they certainly didn't walk people the way he did, like they were deciding something. She kept her eyes down as she worked, repeating a silent rule she'd lived by for years: don't attract attention, don't invite trouble, don't get curious. But curiosity had already found her. From the corner of her vision, she could feel him looking again. Not constantly. Salvatore wasn't sloppy, but enough that she was aware of it. A measured glance here. A pause there, as if he were trying to understand her, not judge her. It unsettled her more than open scrutiny would have. When she passed his table to refill water glasses, the boy looked up at her and smiled shyly, the kind of smile that came from relief more than happiness. Hi, he whispered. She returned the smile before she could stop herself. Hey. Salvatore watched the exchange, something unreadable passing behind his eyes. You didn't have to do that, he said quietly, just loud enough for her to hear. She stopped, fingers tightening around the pitcher. Someone did. A faint crease appeared between his brows. Most people would have waited for security. Most people don't like seeing kids scared, she replied. The words came out sharper than she intended. She expected irritation, maybe even a warning. Instead, he studied her for a long moment, then nodded slightly, as if accepting a truth he couldn't argue with. My son's name is Luca, he said. She blinked, surprised by the softness of it. He seems like a good kid. He is. There was pride there, real pride. It caught her off guard. She stepped back, aware she was lingering. If you need anything else, we're fine, he said. Then, after a pause, for now. She walked away with the strange sensation that the conversation wasn't finished, only postponed. When her shift ended, the sky outside was already dark, city lights reflecting off wet pavement. Elena changed quickly, pulling on her worn coat, her mind still replaying the scene. She told herself she was overthinking it. Rich men came and went, powerful men too. This was just another night. Yet as she stepped outside, she froze. A black car idled by the curb, engine humming low, too sleek, too quiet. The back door opened smoothly. Salvatore stepped out. Her first instinct was to turn and walk back inside. Pride kept her where she was. I hope I'm not crossing a line, he said, his voice calm, unthreatening. I wanted to make sure you got home safely. I don't need an escort, she replied. I know, he said. That's why I asked. She studied him under the streetlight. Up close, he looked older than she'd thought. Not worn-seasoned. Lines etched by responsibility rather than time. Why? She asked. He didn't answer immediately. Because my son hasn't stopped talking about you. That caught her. About me? He said you weren't afraid. Elena let out a short breath. I was. Still, you stood there. Silence stretched between them, filled with traffic sounds and distant sirens. I can walk you, he said. Or I can leave. Your choice. Against her better judgment, she nodded. Fine. Just a block. They walked side by side, not touching, the city flowing around them. "You work hard," he said, observing the calluses on her hands. "Single mother." Her heart skipped. "What makes you think that?" Instinct. She considered lying, didn't. "Yes." "Where is he?" "At home. With my sister." Another pause. "How old?" 6. Something flickered across his face. Calculation, maybe comparison. "That's young." "So is 7, she replied. He almost smiled. They reached the corner. She stopped. "This is far enough," he nodded. "If you ever need anything, I won't," she said gently but firmly. He met her gaze. "People say that until they do." She turned to leave, then hesitated. "Your son." "He's lucky." Salvatore watched her walk away, a strange weight settling in his chest. And Alina, unlocking her apartment door minutes later, had the unsettling sense that her carefully controlled life had just cracked open quietly, but for good. Elena dreamed of breaking glass that night. Not the violent kind, no blood, no screams, just the sound of something fragile shattering over and over again, each crack echoing longer than the last. When she woke before dawn, her chest was tight, her heart racing as if she'd been running. She lay still, staring at the ceiling, listening to the quiet breathing from the small bedroom across the hall. Matteo. She got up and padded barefoot to his door, pushing it open just enough to see him, curled around his pillow, dark lashes resting against his cheeks. 6 years old and already too serious for his age. He had her eyes. Everyone said that. Same deep brown, same guarded look, as if the world was something to be measured before trusted. She watched him longer than usual, guilt pressing at her ribs. She had promised herself this life would stay simple, predictable, safe. No powerful men, no secrets she couldn't control. Salvatore Moretti didn't fit anywhere in that plan. The following week passed without incident, but Alina felt the change everywhere. In the way she scanned the room more carefully at work, in how she noticed black cars she'd never paid attention to before, in how she caught herself wondering against her will what Luca was doing, whether he still talked about her. She told herself it was nothing, a moment, a coincidence. Then, on Friday evening, the hostess leaned close and whispered, "Your table. Corner booth." Alina's stomach dropped. She didn't need to look. She already knew. Salvatore sat exactly where he had before, composed as ever. Luca was with him, swinging his legs under the table, humming softly to himself. Their eyes met. Salvatore inclined his head in acknowledgement. No smile, no claim, just presence. Elena considered asking someone else to take the table. She didn't. Running had never made anything better. She approached, professionalism settling over her like armor. "Good evening," she said evenly. "Hi," Luca said, grinning this time. "Dad, that's her." "I know," Salvatore replied. Elena took their order quickly, avoiding unnecessary conversation. Yet when she brought the food, Luca looked up at her again, curiosity shining through. "Do you have kids?" he asked. Salvatore stiffened slightly. "Luca, it's okay," Elena said before he could stop him. "I do. How old?" 6. Luca's eyes widened. "That's almost my age." "Almost," she agreed. "What's his name?" Her mouth opened, then closed. Something inside her resisted saying it out loud, like a door she didn't want opened in front of Salvatore Moretti. "Matteo," she said finally. The name seemed to hang there. Salvatore's gaze sharpened not aggressively, but with sudden focus. He looked at her differently now, as if recalculating something he thought he understood. "That's a good name," he said. She nodded and stepped away, pulse hammering. The rest of the evening passed with strained normalcy. When they left, Salvatore thanked her again. This time, she didn't brush it off. She simply said, "You're welcome." Outside, the night air felt colder. 2 days later, Elena received a call at work. Her sister's voice was tight, panicked. Matteo fell at the park. He hit his head. Everything else blurred. She didn't remember grabbing her bag or explaining to her manager. She only remembered running, heart lodged in her throat, fear screaming louder than reason. At the hospital, Matteo sat on the bed with a small bandage on his forehead, cheeks tear-stained but eyes alert. Relief hit her so hard her knees nearly gave out. "I'm okay, Mama," he said quickly. "I didn't cry that much." She hugged him carefully, breathing him in, grounding herself in his warmth. "He'll be fine," the doctor said. "Just keep an eye on him tonight." When she turned around, she almost collided with Salvatore. He stood just inside the doorway, hands in his coat pockets, expression grave. For a heartbeat, neither of them spoke. "How did you?" she began. "Your sister called the restaurant," he said quietly. "The manager called me." She should have been angry. Instead, she felt exposed. "I didn't ask for help," she said. "I know," he replied. "You didn't have to." Matteo looked between them. "Mama, who's that?" Elena swallowed. "A friend." Salvatore knelt slightly to be at eye level. "Hello, Matteo." Matteo studied him with unsettling seriousness. "You're Luca's dad." Salvatore paused. "Yes." Matteo nodded, satisfied. "Luca's nice." Something unspoken passed between the adults. Outside the room, Salvatore spoke again, lower. "You're doing this alone." "Yes." "Why?" She met his gaze, years of restraint tightening her voice. "Because some men leave, and some lives don't leave room for children." Silence followed. Salvatore looked away first. In that moment, Elena didn't know she had just brushed against a truth far heavier than she imagined, one that would soon demand answers neither of them was ready to give. Salvatore didn't return to the hospital room. He stood in the hallway long after Elena went back inside, staring at nothing, his thoughts moving in slow, dangerous circles. The smell of disinfectant reminded him of places he hated, rooms where men waited for verdicts, where children were never supposed to be. He had built an empire to keep Luca away from places like this. And yet here he was, powerless in a corridor, shaken by a woman who had nothing and still stood tall. "Some men leave. Some lives don't leave room for children." Her words lodged under his skin. He went home that night and watched Luca sleep, the boy's chest rising and falling with steady innocence. Salvatore sat in the dark, one hand resting on the edge of the bed, wondering when he had become the kind of man a woman would describe without ever saying his name. Elena didn't sleep either. Matteo dozed fitfully on the couch, her arm draped protectively over him. Every time he shifted, her heart jumped. She replayed the hospital moment again and again. Salvatore's sudden presence, the way Matteo had looked at him with instinctive recognition as if children sensed truths adults avoided. She told herself it was coincidence. 2 boys. 2 fathers. 2 lives brushing past each other in a city full of strangers. Still, when she closed her eyes, she saw Salvatore's face when she'd said those words. Not anger, not offense, regret. The next few weeks settled into an uneasy rhythm. Salvatore kept coming to the restaurant, not every night, not predictably, always with Luca. Never alone. Elena served them when assigned, nothing more. No lingering conversations, no personal questions. Yet something subtle grew between them, familiarity without intimacy, shared glances, unspoken understanding. Luca adored her openly. Matteo, when he started coming by after school with Elena's sister, watched Salvatore from a distance, curious but cautious. The boys met one afternoon by accident, bumping into each other near the counter. They stared for a moment, then smiled, simple, immediate, uncomplicated. "What's your name?" Luca asked. "Matteo." "I'm Luca." They shook hands solemnly, as if sealing a pact neither understood. Elena felt a strange ache watching them. Salvatore noticed too. Their eyes met across the room, something heavy passing between them. Later that night, after closing, Elena stepped outside to find Salvatore waiting again. This time, she didn't seem surprised. "I'm not here to intrude," he said before she could speak. "I wanted to talk." She crossed her arms, keeping distance. "About what?" "About you." She laughed softly, without humor. "That's vague." "About your son," he corrected. "About choices." Her expression hardened. "I don't discuss my past." "I'm not asking for details," he said. "Only truth." She looked at him, then really looked. The power, the control, the careful restraint. A man used to commanding rooms, now choosing his words with unexpected care. "Truth is," she said slowly, "I learned early that loving the wrong man can cost a child everything. His jaw tightened. And you think I'm that man? I think your life is dangerous, she said simply. And I think children deserve peace. Silence stretched between them, thick but not hostile. You're right, Salvatore said finally. My life is dangerous. She waited for denial. It didn't come. But Luca doesn't pay for my sins, he continued. I do. She studied his face, searching for manipulation. Found none, just conviction. Why are you telling me this? She asked. Because I respect you, he said, and because I don't want you to misunderstand my intentions. That stopped her. Your intentions toward what? Toward you, he said quietly, and toward our children. Her breath caught. There is no our. Not yet, he agreed. She turned to leave, shaken. This conversation is over, is it? He asked, not following her, letting the question hang in the night air. Weeks passed. Seasons shifted. The city softened under early spring light. Then one afternoon everything changed. Elena was folding laundry when a knock came at the door, sharp, insistent. Her sister opened it. Salvatore stood in the doorway, his face pale, his composure cracked. I need to speak with Elena, he said. Now. Elena stepped forward, heart racing. What's wrong? He swallowed once. I had a background check done. Routine. Her blood ran cold. And? She asked. And Matteo's birth records list no father, he said carefully. But the timing. She shook her head, backing away. No. The dates match, he said, voice barely steady. Elena, how old is Matteo really? She pressed a hand to her chest, panic clawing upward. You don't get to ask that. His eyes searched her face with dawning horror. Elena, he said, softer now. How old is my son? The room went deathly quiet, and Elena knew that the secret she had guarded for 6 years was finally demanding its price. Elena felt the walls closing in, as if the apartment itself had turned against her. She didn't answer him. She couldn't. Her throat locked, every instinct screaming to protect the small life sleeping in the next room. Matteo's soft breathing drifted down the hallway, oblivious to the truth cracking open just feet away. Salvatore didn't move closer. He stood perfectly still, like a man afraid that one wrong step would shatter something already fragile. Elena, he said again, quieter, stripped of command. Please. She turned her face away, eyes burning. You had no right. I know, he said immediately. I shouldn't have looked. I wasn't trying to. This wasn't about control. Something felt wrong, or unfinished. Her sister shifted uncomfortably near the door, sensing she no longer belonged in the room. I'll take a walk, she murmured, already reaching for her coat. The door closed behind her, leaving the truth with nowhere left to hide. Elena sank onto the edge of the couch, hand shaking. I was young, she said finally, voice barely holding together. I was stupid enough to believe that one night could mean something. Salvatore's chest tightened. Memories surged forward 6 years ago. A brief attempt at normalcy. A woman with fierce eyes and guarded smiles. He had left before dawn. No name exchanged. No promise made. Because men like him didn't make promises they couldn't keep. I didn't know who you were at first, Elena continued. Not really. Just another powerful man who thought the world would bend for him. When I found out, it was already too late. She looked up at him then, tears streaking down her face, but her spine straight. I chose my son. Salvatore nodded slowly. You should have. The answer surprised her. I would have destroyed you, he said honestly, or worse, pulled you into a life that eats people alive. You were right to disappear. That admission broke something open inside her. You don't get to be noble now, she whispered. You don't get to rewrite the past. I'm not asking to, he replied. I'm asking about the present. She shook her head. Matteo doesn't need this. He has a life. He's happy. He deserves the truth, Salvatore said. And so do I, her voice sharpened. Truth doesn't always make things better. No, he agreed. But lies always make them worse. The silence stretched until Matteo padded into the room, rubbing his eyes. Mama, he mumbled. Elena was on her feet instantly, kneeling. Hey, you okay? He nodded, then noticed Salvatore. Why are you sad? The question hit like a blade. Salvatore crouched slowly, meeting the boy's gaze. Matteo studied him, searching, as if sensing something familiar he couldn't name. I'm thinking, Salvatore said. Matteo tilted his head. About what? Salvatore glanced at Alina, silently asking permission. Her jaw tightened. Then she nodded once. About you, he said. Matteo considered this, then smiled faintly. I think about you too. You look like Luca. The room stopped breathing. Salvatore closed his eyes for a brief moment. When he opened them, they were wet. He reached out, hesitated, then let his hand rest lightly on Matteo's shoulder. I would like to get to know you, he said carefully. If that's okay. Matteo looked at Alina. She swallowed. Every instinct told her to run. Another quarter. Older told her that running had already cost too much. We'll talk, she said to Salvatore, firm. But slowly. On my terms. He nodded without argument. Always. That night, after Salvatore left, Alina sat awake long after Matteo fell asleep. She watched the city lights flicker through the window, grief and relief tangling in her chest. The secret was out. The future, uncertain and terrifying, stretched ahead. Salvatore drove home in silence, his world redefined by a boy with his eyes and a woman with his strength. He knew what this truth could cost him: alliances, reputation, control. For the first time in decades, none of that mattered, because somewhere in a modest apartment, his son slept without knowing the war his father was already preparing to fight for. Redemption, for love, and for the family he never knew he had. And nothing would ever be the same again. Salvatore didn't sleep that night. He sat in his study until dawn. The city stretched out beneath the windows, like a living map of everything he controlled and everything he didn't. For years, power had been enough. It had filled the empty spaces, drowned out the quieter questions. Now those questions had faces. Brown eyes, small hands, a boy who had looked at him without fear. A boy who shared his blood. By morning, Salvatore had made one decision and postponed 1,000 others. He would not force his way into Matteo's life. Not yet. Alina noticed the change immediately. Salvatore didn't show up unannounced again. No black car outside her building. No quiet pressure. Instead, 2 days later, a single envelope arrived at the restaurant, addressed in careful handwriting. Inside was a note. Short, direct. I will follow your rules. When you're ready, call me. No number. She already had it. Alina folded the note and slipped it into her pocket, heart heavy with a feeling she didn't trust respect. Weeks passed. Then, slowly, carefully, something new began. Short meetings in public places. A park, a cafe, far from Salvatore's usual territory. Luca and Matteo kicking a ball back and forth while the adults watched. From opposite ends of a bench, conversation cautious, deliberate. Salvatore listened more than he spoke. He learned that Matteo loved dinosaurs, hated loud noises, and slept with a nightlight shaped like the moon. He learned that Alina worked too much and rested too little, that she smiled, rarely but fully, as if she saved it for moments that mattered. Alina watched Salvatore just as closely. She saw the way he softened around the boys, how he crouched instead of towering, how he never checked his phone when they were talking. She saw the scars he didn't explain, the discipline that bordered on loneliness. Still, fear never fully left her. One afternoon, as the boys played, she finally asked the question that had been clawing at her chest. What happens when your world finds out? She said quietly. Salvatore didn't pretend not to understand. It already has. Her head snapped toward him. What? My world knows I have one son, he said. They don't know about Matteo, but secrets in my life have a way of becoming weapons. And you're bringing those weapons near him, she said, voice tight. No, he said firmly. I'm dismantling them. She laughed softly, bitter. Men like you don't dismantle power. You protect it. His gaze didn't waver. Men like me destroy what threatens what they love. The word love hung between them, fragile and dangerous. That night, Alina lay awake, staring at the ceiling, wondering when she had started believing him. The answer scared her. The first real test came sooner than she expected. It was Luca's birthday, 8 years old. Salvatore invited Alina and Matteo to this celebration, small, controlled at a private estate with security Elena couldn't ignore. She almost said no. Almost. Matteo had never been to a birthday like that. She saw it in his eyes. When they arrived, the wonder, the disbelief. He stayed close to her at first, then slowly drifted toward Luca, laughter breaking through his usual reserve. Salvatore watched from a distance, pride and pain twisting together in his chest. For a few hours, it almost felt normal. Then a man Alina didn't recognize approached Salvatore, tall, sharp-eyed. His gaze flicked toward the children and lingered too long. Alina felt it immediately, that cold prickle at the back of her neck. Salvatore's body went rigid. "Who is that?" she asked quietly. "Someone I thought was handled," he replied. The man said something low. Salvatore's jaw clenched. He glanced toward the boys, then back. "I need you to take Matteo inside," he said to Alina. Not a command. A plea. "What's happening?" she demanded. "Nothing," he said too quickly. "And everything if I'm not careful." She didn't argue. She took Matteo's hand, pulling him close. As they walked away, she looked back once. Salvatore was already moving calm, controlled, lethal in stillness. Later, long after the party ended, Salvatore came to Alina alone. His knuckles were scraped. His expression was darker than she'd ever seen it. "He won't be a problem again," he said. She stared at his hands. "You promised peace. I promised protection," he replied. "There's a difference." Tears burned her eyes. "This is why I ran." He stepped closer, stopping just short of touching her. "And this is why I'm trying to change." She shook her head, overwhelmed. "I don't know if that's enough." Salvatore's voice dropped, rough with truth. "Neither do I. But I know this. I will not let my past take my sons from me." The word sons landed hard. Elena realized then that the danger wasn't just his world, it was her heart. And once again, she wondered whether loving the wrong man would cost her child everything, or whether walking away now would cost them all something they could never replace. Elena didn't speak to Salvatore for 3 days after the party. She didn't forbid the boys from seeing each other. She didn't make dramatic declarations. She simply pulled back, the way she always did when fear crept too close. Matteo sensed it immediately. He asked fewer questions, stayed nearer to her side, watched her face the way children do when they're trying to understand storms they can't see. Salvatore respected the distance, even when it cost him. He sent no messages, made no appearances. He focused on dismantling what he should have years ago quietly severed. Ties, moving men, closing doors that had once made him untouchable. Power was easier to gain than to loosen. Every step toward safety felt like a small surrender, and yet he took it willingly. Because every time he closed his eyes, he saw Matteo's face when the music had grown too loud at the party, how the boy had flinched, how Elena's hand had gone instinctively to his shoulder. Peace wasn't a concept anymore. It was a child's breath at night. On the 4th day, Elena called. They met at the park where everything had started to feel real. Early evening, cool air. The boys ran ahead, arguing over whose turn it was to kick the ball. Elena didn't sit beside Salvatore this time. She stood, arms folded, watching Matteo. "I won't do this halfway," she said without looking at him. "I won't pretend this is safe if it isn't." "It isn't," Salvatore replied honestly. She turned then, eyes sharp. "Then why are we here?" "Because I'm changing the conditions," he said. "Not asking you to accept my world, asking you to watch me leave parts of it behind." She searched his face, suspicious of hope. "People don't just leave lives like yours." "I'm not people," he said quietly. "I'm a father." That word again. It still unsettled her, still softened something she didn't want softened. "Matteo doesn't know," she said. "Not the full truth." "Luca doesn't either," Salvatore replied. "About most things. I plan to keep it that way." She exhaled slowly. "Children sense lies." "Yes," he said. "That's why I won't lie to them. I'll simplify. I'll protect." "Protection isn't control," she said. "No," he agreed. It's restraint. They fell silent as the boys collapsed onto the grass, breathless and laughing. For a moment, Elena saw it the life that could have been. 2 children growing up side by side. A shared rhythm. A future not defined by absence. The thought terrified her. A week later, the past came knocking in a way neither of them could ignore. Elena was closing the restaurant when a man blocked her path. Not drunk, not loud. Clean cut. Smiling too easily. "Elena," he said. "Salvatore Moretti sends his regards." Her stomach dropped. "I don't know you." "Doesn't matter," he replied. "I know you." And the boy. Ice flooded her veins. "You need to leave." He leaned closer. "Just passing a message. Some men don't like surprises, especially expensive ones." Before she could respond, he walked away. Elena didn't go home. She went straight to Salvatore. He knew the moment he saw her face. "Who spoke to you?" he asked. She repeated the words exactly. Salvatore's expression hardened not with anger, but with something colder. Resolve. "I was afraid this would happen," he said. "You said you were dismantling it," she snapped. "This doesn't feel dismantled." "It is," he said firmly, "which is why this is happening now, not later." She stared at him. "That's supposed to comfort me." "No," he said softly. "The truth rarely does." That night, he doubled security around Elena's building, not visible, not invasive. She noticed anyway. She always noticed. "I won't live like this," she told him. "You won't," he promised. Not for long. True to his word, things shifted fast. The man who had approached her disappeared from the edges of their lives, not violently, not publicly. Just gone. Weeks passed without incident. Matteo began asking questions. "Why does Luca's dad look at me like that?" he asked one night. Elena's heart twisted. "Like what?" "Like he's trying to remember something." She hesitated, then said carefully, "Sometimes adults feel things they don't know how to explain yet." Matteo considered this. "Does he like us?" "Yes," she said. "He does." That was true. Whatever else Salvatore was, his care for the boys was undeniable. He showed up consistently. He listened. He apologized when he made mistakes. Small things. Human things. One evening, after the boys fell asleep during a movie, Elena and Salvatore sat on opposite ends of the couch, the quiet thick but not hostile. "I don't regret keeping him from you," she said suddenly. Salvatore nodded. "I don't regret that you did either." She looked at him, surprised. "Then why does this hurt so much?" "Because the right choice doesn't erase the cost," he said. "It just makes the cost worth paying." She studied his profile, the lines etched by years of control and consequence. For the first time, she let herself wonder not whether he could change, but whether she could forgive. And that question, she knew, would decide everything. Forgiveness did not arrive like a revelation. It crept in quietly, disguised as habit. Elena noticed it in the smallest things, how she stopped flinching when Salvatore's name appeared on her phone, how Matteo no longer lowered his voice when he spoke about Luca's father, how silence between her and Salvatore no longer felt like a threat. It was still there, the fear, but it no longer ruled every decision. That frightened her more than the fear itself. The night Matteo got sick, it was Salvatore she called. It wasn't dramatic. No ambulances, just a fever that spiked too fast, too high, and brought back every memory she'd tried to bury. She sat on the edge of the bed, pressing a cool cloth to Matteo's forehead, her hands steady even as panic clawed at her chest. Salvatore arrived within minutes. He didn't ask questions. He didn't take over. He simply knelt beside the bed, his large hand resting gently over Matteo's smaller one, grounding him the way Elena always did. "I'm okay," Matteo murmured sleepily. "I know," Salvatore said. "We're right here." Elena watched him then, not as a powerful man, not as a threat, but as a father. A man stripped down to the essentials: care, patience, fear held in check for the sake of a child. Later, when Matteo's fever broke and the apartment settled into quiet again, Elena leaned against the kitchen counter, exhausted. "You didn't have to come," she said. "Yes," Salvatore replied simply. "I did." She didn't argue. That night marked a shift neither of them named. They began sharing more meals, conversations, fragments of the past offered cautiously, like truce flags. Salvatore spoke of Luca's mother, gone too early, of the guilt he carried, for the way Luca had grown up surrounded by men instead of softness. Elena spoke of her parents, of leaving home young, of learning how to survive without anyone to catch her if she fell. They didn't speak of love. That word felt too big, too fragile. The boys, however, lived without such restraint. They built worlds together, blanket forts, shared secrets, rivalries that dissolved into laughter. Watching them, Elena felt both joy and grief. Joy for what they had, grief for the years that could never be reclaimed. One afternoon, while the boys were at school, Salvatore stood by Elena's window, looking out over the city. "I'm stepping back," he said. Her heart stuttered. "From us. From that life," he clarified. "Not completely. That's not how it works. But enough." She turned to him slowly. "Why?" "Because one day, Matteo will ask who I am to him," Salvatore said. "And I want the answer to be something I'm not ashamed of." The honesty in his voice cut deep. "And if I ask you to leave," she said quietly, "to disappear again, I won't," he replied. "Not without your consent, not this time." Something in her chest loosened. The reckoning came not with violence, but with exposure, a meeting, a conversation. Old allies, who no longer saw value in a man choosing restraint over dominance. Salvatore returned home late that night, bruised not in body, but in reputation. He said little, only that it was done. "They won't come near you or the boys," he said. "Ever." "And you?" Elena asked. He met her gaze. "I'll live with the consequences." Weeks later, Matteo came home with a drawing. 4 stick figures, 2 tall, 2 small, all holding hands. "Who's this?" Elena asked carefully. "That's you." "That's Luca." "That's me," Matteo said, pointing proudly. Then he hesitated, tapping the 4th figure, "and that's him." Salvatore's breath caught. Matteo looked up at him. "You can be here if you want." Elena closed her eyes. Salvatore knelt, voice unsteady. "I want to." The truth came soon after, not in a single moment, but in pieces, simplified, gentle. Matteo listened, asked questions, absorbed it in his own way. "You're my dad," he said finally, matter of fact. "Yes," Salvatore replied, "if you'll have me." Matteo nodded. "Okay." That was it. No drama, no tears, just acceptance. Elena watched from the doorway, her heart breaking and healing at the same time. Later that night, she stood beside Salvatore on the balcony, the city quiet below. "I don't know what comes next," she said. He took her hand, not possessively, not urgently. "Just there." "Neither do I." She leaned into him just slightly. For the first time in years, the future didn't feel like something to survive. It felt like something to choose. The city learned to live without Salvatore Moretti at its center. Not all at once, not dramatically. There were no headlines, no public reckoning, just a gradual absence. Meetings he no longer attended, decisions made without him, power redistributed among men who mistook his silence for weakness. Salvatore let them. He spent mornings walking Luca to school instead of reviewing ledgers. Evenings were no longer swallowed by obligation but stretched open by dinner tables and homework spread across worn wood. He learned Matteo's routines, how the boy needed quiet before bed, how he pretended not to care if Salvatore stayed to listen to him read. Elena watched it all with cautious awe. She had lived so long preparing for collapse that stability felt like a trick. She waited for the moment the floor would give way, for the call that would drag Salvatore back into a world that demanded blood for loyalty. It didn't come. Instead, the reckoning arrived in a subtler form inside her. One evening, after the boys had fallen asleep, Elena sat alone on the couch, staring at nothing. Salvatore noticed the stillness, the way her shoulders were drawn tight. "What are you thinking about?" he asked. She hesitated, then let the truth surface. "What happens if I lose you?" He sat beside her, not touching. "You won't." "That's not an answer," she said quietly. "Men like you don't just fade into normal lives." "I'm not trying to be normal," he replied. "I'm trying to be present." She turned toward him, eyes wet. "I've built my entire life on not needing anyone. And you've done it well, he said. But need isn't weakness, it's risk. She laughed softly. That's easy for you to say. You've always survived risk. He met her gaze. Not without losing things I can't replace. That night, Alina cried silently in the bathroom. Grief pouring out for the woman she had been 6 years ago, the one who had walked away carrying a secret and a child, believing solitude was the only safety. The past, it turned out, didn't vanish. It waited. Salvatore received the call on a Tuesday afternoon. A name he hadn't heard in years. A voice he once trusted. The message was simple. An old account had surfaced. Loose ends. One final conversation. Elena knew something was wrong the moment he walked through the door. You're going back, she said. He didn't deny it. For one meeting. Her chest tightened. You promised. I promised to protect you and the boys, he said. That's what this is. Protection doesn't mean sacrifice, she snapped. Not anymore. He stepped closer, careful. If I don't close this, it stays open. And open doors let danger in. Silence pressed down on them. Matteo's laughter drifted from the other room. Luca's voice answered it. Life, fragile and beautiful, unaware of the weight balanced above it. Elena looked at Salvatore, really looked at him, not the man he had been, but the one he was choosing to become. Come back, she said. I will, he promised. The hours stretched. Night fell. Elena sat awake long after the boys slept, every sound outside sharpening her nerves. She told herself she was overreacting, that this was the cost of loving someone with a past. The knock came near midnight. Her heart nearly stopped. Salvatore stood in the doorway, unharmed but exhausted. His eyes held something final. It's done, he said. She didn't ask how. She stepped into him instead, arms wrapping around his waist, face pressed into his chest. For the first time, she didn't hold back. I was so afraid, she whispered. He closed his eyes, holding her like something precious. So was I. They didn't rush what followed. No declarations, no promises carved in stone, just the quiet understanding that they were no longer walking separate paths that occasionally crossed. They were choosing the same direction. Weeks later, Salvatore made it official, not publicly, but decisively. He transferred remaining interests. Passed leadership to men who would never reach past the boundaries he set. The world adjusted. It always did. What didn't adjust was the way Matteo ran to him when he came home, or how Luca leaned against Elena while watching movies, or the way Elena's laughter returned, slow and uncertain at first, then real. One night, as Elena tucked Matteo into bed, he looked up at her seriously. Are we a family now? He asked. Her throat tightened. Yes, she said. We are. In the living room, Salvatore watched her from a distance, a quiet smile touching his lips. For the first time in his life, power was no longer measured in fear or loyalty. It was measured in moments that could be lost, and he intended to keep every single one. The winter that followed felt different, softer, cleaner, the kind that comes after storms when the air smells like renewal rather than smoke and cold concrete. Salvatore walked through the apartment quietly, listening to the boys, laughing over a board game. Matteo's small hand clutched Salvatore's, and Luca's elbow nudged Matteo's shoulder as if claiming him for his own. Elena sat nearby, her posture relaxed in a way he hadn't seen in years, her hair falling loosely over her shoulders, and he realized that, for the first time, he had never wanted to leave a room more than he wanted to stay in this one. Months of caution and distance had dissolved into a fragile normalcy. No black cars outside, no threats hovering just beyond reach. Life was simple, and yet layered with complexity that only made it feel real. Salvatore didn't try to rush Elena or Matteo. He didn't try to assert control. Instead, he built trust quietly, like the slow laying of stone, careful not to crack what had survived years of fear. One evening, Elena found herself standing in the kitchen while Salvatore, the boys cleaned up the living room together. Matteo held a tiny sponge over Salvatore's hand, trying to scrub imaginary dirt, and Salvatore laughing softly when Matteo jabbed at his fingers. Luca sat cross-legged on the carpet, tossing cushions back and forth, giggling as Matteo tried to dodge. Elena watched them and felt the weight in her chest, years of protection, of fear, of running, lifting in small increments. She didn't say anything. She just let herself watch, let herself feel that maybe, just maybe, she could let the world in again without losing the one she loved. Later, when the boys were tucked into bed, Salvatore found her on the balcony, looking out at the city lights. Snow began to fall lightly, frosting the streets in white, and for the first time the city didn't seem threatening. It seemed like a home. "You okay?" he asked, stepping close, hands in his coat pockets. She nodded, but didn't speak immediately. The night had softened her defenses, though she still felt the remnants of every hardship, every careful decision, every lonely night. "I think I'm finally tired of being afraid," she said softly. He studied her, dark eyes gentle. "You don't have to be. Not with me, not with us." Her gaze dropped, then lifted again, steady and honest. "I wasn't sure I could trust you. Ever. But now, I think maybe I can." Salvatore reached for her hand, entwining his fingers with hers without force. It was simple, grounded, real. "We'll take it slow. We don't have to have it all figured out." A small smile tugged at her lips. "Slow sounds. Right." He nodded, letting the warmth of the moment settle over them. "I've spent my life chasing control. You and the boys. You've taught me something else. Patience. Love. Responsibility. Real responsibility." Elena's breath hitched. "And if it all falls apart?" "It won't," he said, voice low, full of conviction. "Not if we stay together." The snow fell heavier now, dusting the balcony in white. Matteo's laughter echoed faintly from inside as he and Luca played a late-night game, Salvatore watching him smile and feel something entirely uncalculated. Elena rested her head lightly against Salvatore's shoulder, feeling the tension of years seep away. For the first time, she allowed herself to imagine a future where the past didn't dictate the present, where her son could grow up with two fathers not by blood, but by choice and protection, and where she could love without fear, without hesitation. Salvatore tightened his hold slightly, pressing a kiss to the top of her head. "We're home," he whispered. And it was true. Not just the apartment, not just the city. They were home with each other, with the boys, with the quiet and chaotic rhythm of family life that no empire, no threat, no secret could destroy. Elena tilted her head back, looking at him with a vulnerability she had never shown before. "Thank you," she said softly. He shook his head. "No, thank you. For protecting him, for surviving, for trusting me enough to let me in." She smiled, genuine and slow. "I think I'm ready now, ready for whatever comes next, as long as it's together." Salvatore smiled, dark and rare, the kind that didn't need to command a room but simply existed, strong and quiet. Together, he agreed. The city slept below them, the snow covering its scars, but inside that apartment, inside that fragile, hard-won life, there was warmth, there was laughter, and there was love. A love built not from power, or fear, or control, but from trust, patience, and redemption. And for the first time, all of them, Salvatore, Elena, Matteo, and Luca, felt like they could breathe freely, without looking over their shoulders. The past was no longer a chain. It was a foundation. They had survived. They had chosen each other. And the future, uncertain, fragile, beautiful, was theirs to claim. If you enjoyed this story, please like the video and subscribe to the channel for more cinematic mafia love stories that tug at the heart and soul.